The realtor told me the basement had been sealed since 1987, but when I pulled that old plywood door open, the light down there was already on. This happened in November of 2022, just outside Dayton, Ohio. My wife and I had just bought our first house. Nothing fancy, small two-story place in an old neighborhood where every driveway had basketball hoops with faded nets. The house smelled like dust and old carpet glue. The previous owner had died in hospice months earlier, so the place had been empty for a while. The weird thing was the basement. The realtor mentioned it almost casually, said the old owner had boarded off part of it decades ago after water damage. At first, I didn't care. I worked nights delivering medical supplies, so most afternoons I just sleep while my wife painted walls upstairs. One rainy Thursday, I finally went down there looking for storage space. The basement was freezing. Not normal cold, damp cold. I remember hearing the hum of an old dehumidifier somewhere in the corner. There were shelves with rusted paint cans, a broken Christmas tree stand, empty jars. Then I noticed fresh footprints in the dust. Bare footprints. At first, I honestly thought they were mine somehow, but they were too small, and they led straight to the boarded section at the back wall. That part bothered me. The plywood looked old, but the screws didn't. They were shiny, like somebody had replaced them recently. That night, around 1:30 a.m., I got home from work and heard something downstairs. Not loud, just movement, like chairs scraping softly across concrete. I froze halfway down the hallway. My wife was asleep upstairs. The sound stopped the second I touched the basement door. I opened it. Nothing, but the basement light was on again. I know for a fact I turned it off earlier. The next morning, I grabbed a drill and removed the plywood. Behind it was another room. Small, windowless, concrete walls, and weirdly clean compared to the rest of the basement. There were folding chairs arranged in rows facing the wall. 7 chairs exactly. And on the wall, somebody had painted a large black circle. Nothing else, no symbols, no words, just a circle. I remember feeling embarrassed more than scared, like maybe I'd uncovered some old church group room or something. Then I noticed the candles, fresh wax, not melted from years ago. And there was a smell in the room I can still remember. Not rot, not mold, incense, like burnt cloves. I called my wife downstairs. She came halfway down the steps, then stopped. She asked me why there was a man standing in the corner. I turned around immediately. There was nobody there, but I realized something else. There were 8 chairs now, not 7, 8. I swear to God, I counted them 3 times before, and the last chair, the new one, was directly behind me. That's when we heard footsteps upstairs, slow footsteps, crossing our living room, even though we were both in the basement. Then came the sound that still wakes me up sometimes, a man coughing, right above us. We ran upstairs. Nobody was there. Front door still locked, windows closed, nothing stolen. But on our dining table was a ceramic bowl I had never seen before. Inside it were 8 burnt matchsticks. Exactly 8. We moved out 3 weeks later. The police searched the property, found nothing. No fingerprints, no signs anyone had been living there. The weirdest part came later. I contacted the daughter of the previous owner. She told me her father used to host prayer meetings in the basement every Friday night after midnight. But near the end of his life, people stopped coming, except for one man. She said nobody ever learned his name, only that he always arrived early and was somehow already inside the basement before anyone unlocked the house. This happened in the summer of 2021 in Pine Bluff, Arkansas. My parents rented this old 1-story house near the edge of town after my dad got transferred for work. The place was cheap, which should have been the first red flag. The house sat slightly raised above the ground with one of those narrow crawl spaces underneath instead of a basement. You could access it through a little wooden hatch near the backyard AC unit. The first few weeks were normal. I worked evenings at a Walmart about 10 minutes away, My younger brother Mason stayed up late gaming in the living room most nights. The weird stuff started after a thunderstorm knocked the power out one Friday night. Around 2 a.m., while we were sitting there sweating in the dark, we heard crying. Like a little kid. At first it sounded far away, but after a minute we realized it was directly beneath the floor. My mom thought maybe an animal got trapped under the house during the storm. My dad even went outside with a flashlight, but the crying stopped the second he stepped into the yard. By morning, everything seemed normal again. Then it happened the next night, same time, 2:13 exactly. This time the crying lasted longer, and mixed in with it, we heard scratching, slow dragging sounds underneath us. Over the next week, everybody started sleeping badly. My mom said she heard whispering through the vents. Dad got angry anytime someone mentioned it. I think he was trying to convince himself the house wasn't creepy. But Mason became obsessed with it. One night he told me he thought the crying sounded fake, like somebody pretending to cry. That sentence bothered me way more than I expected. The next night, Mason waited outside by the crawlspace hatch with a flashlight and his phone. I remember standing behind him in the humid backyard while cicadas screamed in the trees. Insects buzzing came, and right on cue, the crying started. Low, weak, human. Mason looked at me and laughed nervously before pulling open the hatch. The smell that came out was awful. Wet dirt, mold, something rotten. He crawled halfway inside while I held the flashlight. The beam barely reached past the pipes and dirt. Then the crying stopped. Complete silence. Mason whispered, "Hello?" Nothing. Then I heard it. Very soft, a voice under the house. Not crying anymore, whispering, "My son." Mason scrambled backwards so fast he slammed his head on the wood beams above him. He came out pale, shaking. I asked him what he saw. He kept saying there was someone down there. Dad finally called the police after that. 2 officers came the next afternoon and checked the crawl space. They found signs that somebody had absolutely been living under the house. Empty water bottles, food wrappers, blankets, and dozens of cigarette butts. But what scared the officers most was how deep the space actually went. Apparently, there was a narrow dirt tunnel dug beneath the foundation leading farther underground, farther than the flashlight could reach. The police searched for hours, never found anyone. No footprints leading away from the property either, just that tunnel. Before we moved out, one officer quietly told my dad something that still sticks with me. He said whoever was under there had likely been listening to us for weeks, learning our schedules, learning our names. This happened in late October of 2020 in Rockford, Illinois. I just rented a small house after my divorce. Cheap place, old neighborhood, the kind where every porch light flickers a little. The basement came with it. It wasn't finished or anything, just exposed concrete walls, an old washer and dryer, and shelves packed with dusty junk left behind by the previous owner. I used the basement mostly for storage. Every night after work, I'd head down there to smoke because my landlord didn't allow it inside. The basement always smelled damp, like wet cardboard and rust, and there was this constant humming sound from the old freezer in the corner. The first strange thing happened maybe a week after I moved in. While I was sitting downstairs scrolling through my phone, I heard 3 knocks beneath my chair. Not on the wall, underneath the floor. I froze for a second, then laughed it off. Old pipes, house settling. But over the next few nights, it kept happening. Always 3 knocks. Always around midnight. One night, I brought my friend Marcus over to help move furniture. While we were carrying boxes downstairs, he suddenly stopped and looked at me. He asked, "You got somebody else down here?" I told him no. Then he pointed toward the freezer. There were muddy footprints on the floor leading behind it. Fresh ones. The thing is, there was no space behind the freezer. It sat flush against the wall. Marcus thought maybe homeless people were sneaking into the basement somehow. So we moved the freezer aside. Behind it was a small wooden door I swear hadn't been there before, about 3 feet tall, painted the same gray as the wall. No handle, just a rusted latch. I remember my stomach dropping when we opened it. There was a narrow concrete staircase leading farther down underground. I asked the landlord about it the next day. He went quiet for a few seconds before saying the lower section had been sealed years ago after flooding issues. He told me not to go down there. That should have been enough for me. But that night, around 12:14 a.m., the knocking started again. Only this time, it came from behind the little door. 3 knocks. Then silence. 3 more. I grabbed a flashlight and opened the door. The air coming up from below smelled stale, thick, like trapped air. The staircase went down farther than I expected. At the bottom was another room. Small, concrete walls, no windows, and in the center of the room was a metal folding chair facing the wall. That alone scared me, but what really got me was the tape recorder sitting on the chair. Old silver one, like from the 90s. The play button was already pressed down. I heard breathing coming from the speaker, slow breathing. Then a voice, my voice, saying things I had said earlier that week while alone upstairs. Exact sentences, exact pauses. I backed toward the stairs immediately. Then I noticed something scratched into the wall behind the chair. Tall marks, hundreds of them, like someone had been counting days. And at the very bottom, one fresh mark, still white in the concrete dust. That's when I heard movement upstairs. Heavy footsteps crossing my kitchen floor. Slow, deliberate. Even though I lived alone, I shut off the flashlight and stood completely still. Then, from directly above me, 3 knocks. I ran upstairs so fast I nearly slipped on the basement steps. The kitchen was empty, front door locked, windows shut, but the basement door behind me slowly creaked back open by itself. Just enough for darkness to show through. I moved out 2 days later. The landlord stopped answering my calls after that. A month later, I found an article online about the previous tenant. Apparently, he vanished without warning in 2018. No missing person was ever solved. The article included one detail police never explained. Neighbors reported hearing knocking sounds underground for weeks after he disappeared.